Hi, everyone. I'm Vladimir Jutit. We are watching all the stories happening in the United States and around the world. Let's begin. This morning, growing confusion among federal workers. Many are trying to make sense of the ultimatums from Elon Musk and the White House over the future of their jobs. And the Vatican says the Pope's condition is improving slightly, but he does remain in critical condition in the hospital. We're live in Rome with the very latest on the Pontiff's health. And the countdown is on, and we're potentially minutes away from Blue Origin's 10th space tourism flight. We're tracking the liftoff to space. This is CBS News 24/7. Start with this. Do they have a job or don't they? There is confusion, as you might imagine, from federal workers all across the country because the Office of Personnel Management said each agency can now decide on how to respond to that email from Elon Musk demanding employees list 5 of their accomplishments. This directly opposes Elon Musk's demand. So let us bring in CBS News White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi. She's breaking it all down for us. Olivia, it's so hard to understand what's going on here because you've got Elon Musk saying that you have to respond to his request to list your 5 accomplishments, or that will result in termination. But you've got the heads of these various government agencies telling their workers that the people at the top of those organizations, are going to be the ones to decide how this proceeds. So what are workers supposed to do?
Yeah, Vlad, it really just depends what agency you're with. We know that Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy told his employees that work with the agency, you have to reply, and you should reply. But we've also heard from Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence, as well as some members of the Pentagon, who told their people, because you deal with such classified information, don't reply or hold off on replying, or if you do reply, do it in coordination with us so we know what you're saying. But this really just does depend what agency you fall under. Now, of course, you mentioned that the Office of Personnel Management told these secretaries, look, it's voluntary, it's up to you, it's up to your people to decide. But Musk issued a new threat last night where he said, basically, it's round 2. If you don't reply this time, we will consider this your resignation. So a lot of confusion that we're seeking clarity on from the White House today. But we did hear from President Trump yesterday about this very issue. And he was essentially asked, is there a rift between these secretaries and Elon Musk about what they're essentially supposed to do with this email? And he maintains that it's not these secretaries going against Musk, but rather them being protective of some of the classified information that they deal with. Take a listen here to what he had to say about that specifically.
What he's doing is saying, are you actually working? And then if you don't answer, like you're sort of semi-fired or you're fired, because a lot of people are not answering because they don't even exist.
So there you hear the president sort of backing Elon Musk over his secretary, saying, look, what he's doing is actually asking if people are actually working, which is what Musk says he's doing. Musk also downplaying the email, saying it's just an email. This should not be such a big deal. So interesting to note there that they are essentially downplaying the impact of this email that went out to 2.3 million federal workers. Did
the president clarify what the definition of semi-fired means? I mean, am I semi-dead? Am I semi-stoned? Am I what does that mean?
To my knowledge, he did not clarify what a semi-fired would actually mean, but it's a good question, and it's something we'll be asking the White House later. What does that mean? Is that these employees that are placed on administrative leave to be fired at a later date? Who actually has to answer this? Who is combing through what would be 2 million emails from federal employees explaining what they did, and who gets to judge whether or not it is sufficient enough of what they're doing that would amount to keeping their job or not, or being semi-fired.
That's why I'm so impressed by you, Olivia, because you can take what is pretty much a silly question and add some seriousness to that question, as you would as a White House reporter. I love that. All right, let me ask you about this judge who's upholding the White House's ban on the Associated Press's access, at least for now, as it decides the merits of the case. I do love that the White House press corps, from what I understand, Olivia, yesterday when French President Emmanuel Macron was visiting with President Trump, the Associated Press had their French reporter reporter for the Associated Press, asked one of the first questions to both men. But what are you hearing about what it means for the U.S. White House representatives of the Associated Press?
Yeah, they certainly did do that. We did see yesterday, though, a federal judge denied this emergency motion from the Associated Press that would essentially restore their access to Air Force One and the Oval Office. We saw that access taken away after the Associated Press did not change their wording from Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of America. They took away that access. The White House did. The AP sued. Now, this federal judge says they want to have a full briefing on this case before making any sort of decision. But for now, they denied that emergency motion. We know Trump, of course, signed that executive order on his first day in office, changing the name from Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of America. I do want to read a quote from the AP in a statement that they've put out. They said, "We will stand for the right of independent media everywhere and a ruling that reinforces the right to free speech," which was the whole argument of this case. And I should note that the CBS News also signed on to a letter from the White House Correspondents Association calling for this ban to be lifted.
And so did, as I understand it, Olivia, other news organizations who are not generally considered moderate or objective, including some of, for example, Newsmax and others that also signed on to this letter. Am I right about that?
Yes, you are. You are, Vlad.
Yeah. All right. Olivia Rinaldi, always bringing it for us. Thank you, Olivia. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. A key part of President Trump's legislative agenda, I believe, is what that is supposed to say, is expected on the House floor at some point today. This is a big test for House Speaker Mike Johnson, who will need to bring in members from his own party who may not be on board. I'm going to bring in CBS News congressional reporter Torian Small, who's on the Hill for us. So, Torian, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries is calling this a Republican budget scheme. What does that mean?
Quite wary of some of the extensive cuts that House Speaker Johnson is looking to undergo as part of this massive budget resolution plan. We saw that he announced it will be about $2 trillion in cuts. Of that, about 800 million plus in mandatory spending under the House Energy and Commerce Committee. I should note in that panel's purview is Medicaid. So Democrats are raising the flag there, saying, listen, this is an about face from what Republicans talked about on the trail, how they wouldn't be touching Medicaid. Now they're saying it's time to reform that program and make some very significant cuts there. We know that this is part of Johnson's plan to offset this massive expansion of the 2017 Tax and Jobs Act. That would add about $4.5 trillion to the national deficit. Some Republicans, hardline Republicans and fiscal hawks are saying that that's just not enough. More cuts need to be made in order to effectively balance the budget in their minds.
So as we said, this is a make or break moment for Mike Johnson and his speakership. How does he get those Republicans who are on the fence about the budget to rally? I mean, he's got to do this, Torian, this week. Normally, there's a couple more days to sort of whip those votes. He's not giving those members time to sort of come to a decision where they might move to his position.
Yeah, Vlad, not just this week. In a matter of hours, we'll see the first procedural vote for this massive budget bill, and then ultimately a vote around 6 o'clock this evening. Whether or not that goes forward is still TBD because, as we know, leadership is looking to whip up as many votes, especially those on the fence votes, as possible. We know in the past couple of hours, people like Representative Victoria Sparks of Indiana, Thomas Massie of Kentucky, already announced that they won't be supporting this bill because they think it isn't effective enough, like I just said, in some of the more deep spending cuts that they want to see. Chip Roy of Congressman, a pretty prominent leader on the House Freedom Caucus, also said that he shared some of the same concerns as Sparks and is interested to see where this conversation goes. I know that Speaker Johnson has been doing a lot of backdoor conversations and meetings with some of these on the fence members, including moderates, many of them who had problems with the idea of touching Medicaid, especially after, again, talking about on the trail how they were looking to protect it. So this is going to be a tough task and a true test of Johnson's leadership. We saw him get the job job done when it came to his speakership, even though there was a significant pressure campaign mounted against him by some of the more hard-right members. Now we'll see whether or not those conversations, those negotiations will pay off for him when it comes time to bring this bill to the floor, Vlad. All
right, Torian Small for us. Torian, as always, we appreciate it. We'll be checking in with you throughout the day. To Rome now, where Pope Francis is alert and held work meetings in the hospital as he continues fighting double pneumonia. There was a somber prayer gathering in Vatican City last night as the pontiff marks 12 days in the hospital. CBS News senior foreign correspondent Seth Doan is live in Vatican City and joining us now. So, Seth, some cautiously good news this morning.
Yeah, we heard a little bit of encouraging news last night, but as you know, Vlad, the news really oscillates back and forth. At one point, you're hearing something that seems more encouraging. At another point, you're hearing something that seems more discouraging. Our own Dr. John LaPook said it's not that unusual that doctors have not given us a prognosis yet, because this is a patient that is still in critical condition, as we've talked about in recent days, is considered a fragile patient with underlying lung conditions, and one that's very difficult to treat. He's on a number of medications, and if you treat one thing, it could have adverse effects for the other. We know that he slept well last night. We heard from Vatican sources earlier in the day that he was able to get up out of bed, that he's able to eat on his own. So it's little bits and pieces that we're hearing so far today. But yes, encouraging. We've heard that last night we understood that there was less oxygen being given to the Pope, that there had been no more acute respiratory crises that we had heard about over the weekend. We haven't heard mention of a blood transfusion. So some good, some less encouraging, and really questions as to what's actually happening, because we only get these little bits.
So I guess it must be something that he's meeting with the Vatican Secretary of State.
Yeah, Cardinal Parolin was there. Cardinal Parolin was behind me in St. Peter's Square last night for that prayer vigil that you mentioned last night. He was in Burkina Faso last week. I know when the Pope, or 2 weeks ago when the Pope was in the hospital and first went into the hospital. It's showing, Vlad, that business is as usual, as best as the Vatican can show at this point. Of course, as you walk around here, certainly talking with pilgrims who've come to Rome, but also talking with priests, talking with sisters and nuns here. Everyone, of course, is talking about Pope Francis in the hospital, talking about his health. But the Pope and the Church is trying to show, or is showing, that work continues. We get, those of us who cover the Vatican, get these bulletins every day that show various archbishops and priests being put in this place or that place, this city or that, and that continues. We're continuing to see the work of the Church. Today, they started the process of toward beatification, towards sainthood of, I believe, about 5 different people. So the Church is trying to show, look, Francis may be in the hospital, but we're still at work.
All right, Seth Doan reporting from Vatican City for us this morning. He's been on Pope duty all week. Thank you, Seth. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Vlad.
All right, let's check out this video of a Delta Airlines flight. This is out of Atlanta yesterday, and it became filled with what the FAA called possible smoke. The South Carolina-bound flight was first forced to turn around minutes after takeoff. None of the 94 passengers and 5 crew on board were injured. Some, though, had to use emergency slides to exit. The FAA is now investigating. We're also following some relief from the bitter cold as above-average temperatures move across the country. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Andrew Kosak with the first look at the national forecast. Hey, Andrew.
Hey, Vlad, good morning. Yeah, we are talking about a big warm-up continuing across much of, especially the central portion of the United States. I want to put up the map and kind of show you where the cloud cover is and where the sunshine is today, because what we're seeing out there is mainly sunny skies across portions of really Texas, the Midwest, the Deep South, and these are the areas that are looking at temperatures today in the 70s, if not 80s. Let's go check the maps, because we do have an atmospheric river that we've been talking about in the Pacific Northwest. Today is going to be the last day for the soaking rain, for the heavy snow. You can still see across portions of Washington State, Oregon. We have a winter storm warning in effect for the higher areas of the Cascades, and still for areas like Idaho and Montana. But again, this is going to come to an end with just a couple of scattered showers as we head toward your Wednesday. We also have some light rain moving across the northeast. This will give some showers to Pennsylvania and the Poconos. East Coast will be safe with temperatures today in the 50s and 60s. Vlad?
All right, Andrew, thank you very much. Check in with you a little bit later. Still ahead, the U.S. sides with Russia and splits with the European Union and key allies over the invasion of Ukraine. The fallout from the stunning shift just ahead. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. In a remarkable turn of events, yesterday the United States split with its European allies at the UN, siding with Russia and opposed an effort to condemn Vladimir Putin for his country's invasion of Ukraine. The move came after President Trump met with French leader Emmanuel Macron at the White House amid efforts by the Trump administration to bring the war in Ukraine to an end. Well, this morning the fighting continues with Russia launching a wave of aerial attacks on Ukraine overnight. CBS News foreign correspondent Imtiaz Taib has more from Kyiv.
Well, after a day of stunning developments at the White House, at the UN, and here in the capital, Kyiv, on the 3-year anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, that war is still very much ongoing. Overnight, Russia launched 7 missiles and over 200 drones at Ukraine. This is the 3rd night in a row we've seen such large attacks on this country. And it really just underscores the fact that despite the diplomacy and the tension that we've seen between both President Trump and President Zelensky, and indeed with Europe as a whole, that this is a conflict that not only is ongoing, but is affecting the lives of Ukrainians almost every day. And again, we've been speaking to Ukrainians about how they're feeling in this moment, what they're thinking about the future. And many of them are afraid that they will have to give up some of their territory to Vladimir Putin in order to end this war, begging the question, after all of this fighting, all of this loss and all of this suffering, to then have to lose part of their territory because they've lost support of President Trump, or at least appear to have lost the support of President Trump. What has all this fighting been for? Still, Ukrainians we've been speaking to say that they will continue to fight, they will continue to defend their country, because for them, that is what this has all been about. Back to you.
All right, MTS, thank you very much. So there's some new data out from the Conference Board that shows the Consumer Confidence Index dropped by 7 points in February. This marks the largest monthly decline in the index since August of 2021. It is the 3rd straight month-on-month decline. So I want to bring in CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady. She's joining me here in Studio 55 to talk about this. Okay, you've been here the last couple of times. It's number 3. What's going on?
So this was not the reading that we wanted, and markets are certainly reacting the same. However, it does underscore another confidence reading that we got last week from the University of Michigan, which was also bad. What this tells you is that consumers aren't feeling great about where the economy is going. Particularly, I was just reading through the release. They think inflation is going to be 6%.
Wow.
Yes, we are at 3% right now, 6% in a year. Now that comes up from 5.2%, which was the last reading. The other thing that I want to tease out here, the expectations index, that's basically the short-term expectations for your income, business, and the economy at large. It dipped to 72.9. That is really important because 80 is the threshold for when you start to see potentially a recession looming. That's the tipping point. We haven't been below that number since June 2024.
So when people don't have confidence in the way it's measured with this index, what does it mean for what they are actually spending on? Because I'm just curious, I know the market is down and it's headed lower, but people are still spending, people are still buying things, people are still going on vacation. Even now, we did a segment, you probably saw it earlier this morning, with Jill Schlesinger talking about home buyers, and she talked about how there may be some relief for people who want to buy a home in the spring. So people are still spending money. What does this all mean?
Okay, so they have been spending money, but if you listen to the retail earnings that we have gotten, it's not about the backward looking, it's about their guidance. You heard Walmart say, we may see a slowdown, and we're going to get Target and a number of the other retailers in the next few weeks. We're starting to see these big companies, which are often economic bellwethers for the consumer, saying, even though we provide need to have items, we're expecting a little bit of a slowdown. And so we haven't seen that yet. In terms of the retail numbers, I should correct myself. We did see a slowdown in January.
Right.
It dipped in like the biggest dip in 2 years. So you're starting to see some cracks, not across all income levels. People making above 100,000 are still out there spending, but lower income folks, they're feeling it right now.
And so ultimately, as these companies pull back expectations for what they expect for their revenues, that could lead to potential layoffs. We've already seen it in some companies. I know today you were on CBS Mornings talking about Starbucks, and I know that that was at the corporate level, but what does it portend for the future?
Well, if people spend less, the cuts need to come from somewhere, right? You need to cut your costs. So you could see something like that. And then, of course, you just layer on this potential tariff threat that we've been getting, and that would increase costs, increase prices for consumers. They might spend less. So it's a really tricky chicken and an egg thing.
Real quick before we go, what's going on with Bitcoin? Do you know any Bitcoin bros?
I know a lot of Bitcoin bros.
Yeah, I figured you would. What's going on there?
So it's dipped below 100,000. It's dipped below 90,000. A lot of stuff that we've been seeing with the SEC rolling back investigations, you would have expected that to see higher. What's going on is that the broader market is down and people are taking their money out of risky assets like Bitcoin and they're fleeing to safety.
That's what I always thought they would. All right, Kelly O'Grady, thank you. Always great to have you in Studio 55. Thank you. All right, we're just moments away from possible liftoff. We're counting down to Blue Origin's 10th space tourism flight. We'll take you there next. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Here's a look at some of the top stories we're following. The accused Gilgo Beach serial killer is expected back in court today. His legal team is fighting to get some DNA evidence thrown out. Rex Horman's attorneys claimed the lab's methods to obtain the evidence was unproven. The results are unreliable. Prosecutors argue the DNA evidence links Horman to 6 of the 7 victims he's accused of killing. He's pleaded not guilty in connection with these murders on New York's Long Island. A listeria outbreak is now being blamed for 12 deaths. The FDA says the infections are linked to frozen supplemental nutritional shakes. At least 38 people in 21 states have been infected from the Lions, Ready Care, and Cisco Imperial frozen supplemental shakes. The shakes were distributed to long-term care facilities, and they were not for retail sale. And Joann Fabrics is shutting its doors for good. Ryan, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You're not going to be able to. You're not going to be able to buy your yarn, folks. The 82-year-old fabric and craft retailer was auctioned off to new owners this weekend after battling weak sales and filing twice for bankruptcy. The company that bought the chain says it will have going out of business sales. Oh, there you go. There you go. Going out of business sales at each location. Joann's website says it will still be operational, and you can always go to Michael's, Ryan. You can go to Michael's. Always go to Michael's. All right, recent data from Customs and Border Protection shows apprehensions along the southern border from January 21st through the 31st were down 85% from the same period last year. Border Patrol recorded nearly 30,000 apprehensions of migrants who crossed the southern border unlawfully last month. I want to bring in CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camila Montoya Galvez, who is in El Paso, Texas. So, Camilo, I'm really intrigued by these numbers. Legal crossings, as you know, they've been dropping since November and are well off their record highs from December of 2023. I'm curious, given how forceful President Trump campaigned on this issue, the force by which he has decreed what he intends to do in terms of arrests and returns back to home origin, the countries where some of these migrants are coming from. I wonder if that's serving as a deterrent. I note that the number of deportations is about the same, but if people are deterred by what the president is saying, is that playing into this?
Well, look, Vlad, multiple things can be true. It is true, on one hand, that illegal crossings here along the U.S.-Mexico border have been going down for the better part of the last year after soaring to record levels under the Biden administration in 2022 and 2023. And officials at the time credited the Biden administration's asylum restrictions from last year, as well as legal pathways that allowed people to come here legally in an attempt to discourage them from crossing this border behind us illegally, as well as Mexico's efforts to interdict and stop migrants. But now it is also true that illegal crossings have fallen even further since President Trump took office in January. And obviously, Trump administration officials, rather, are crediting their dramatic and sweeping crackdown on illegal immigration for that even further reduction in illegal crossings. In fact, illegal crossings here, Vlad, are now down more than 90% from the same time last year. And over the weekend, the Department of Homeland Security reported the lowest single-day tally in migrant crossings in over 15 years. So there has been a sharp, dramatic reduction in illegal crossings, and Trump administration officials would say that that is due to their policies, which now include an order that essentially allows agents here, Vlad, to summarily deport people across this border or to their home countries without allowing them to request asylum, which, as you know, traditionally has been a legal right for migrants who are physically on American soil. Vlad?
Has always, or at least historically, over the course of the last couple of decades, has been in place. But it does seem to the administration, to be fair to the administration, that even the tough talk is having some effect on deterring people from trying to make that trip into the United States. Now, you were in Mexico yesterday. Today, you're taking a ride along the border on the U.S. side. Give us a preview of your reporting and what we can expect.
Well, look, Vlad, we are riding along with Border Patrol here in the El Paso sector, which covers West Texas and also New Mexico. And we don't expect to see much in terms of migrant crossings because of the very low number of people who are right now entering the country illegally across this border behind us. But in Mexico, we still saw a bottleneck of people who are desperate and now stranded because of the changing U.S. policies. And in many ways, their American dreams of making it into the U.S. to work here or to request asylum or to reunite with relatives are now fading away, mainly because the Trump administration, Vlad, ended a system that allowed them to use a smartphone app known as CBP1 to get an appointment to enter the U.S. legally at a border crossing point, a legal entry point along this border. That program is now terminated, and migrants are essentially stranded on the other side of this border. And many of them told us that they are now thinking about going back to places like Venezuela, Colombia, and Central America that they fled from because of violence, insecurity, and poverty. So this is something that obviously the Trump administration would say is indicative in supporting their theory that their tougher policies are having the intended impact.
All right, Camilo Montoya Galvez for us. Thank you very much. Appreciate it as always, my friend. We are potentially moments away from the launch of Blue Origin's 10th space tourism flight. The window officially opened at 10:30 Eastern, but the launch is now on hold. The company, founded by Amazon's Jeff Bezos, says today's crew of 6 includes a Spanish TV host, a venture capitalist making his second trip to suborbital space, and one flyer who still has not been named. Let's bring in CBS News space consultant Bill Harwood. So, Bill, I know these delays are typical. Have you heard anything?
Haven't heard a word. Blue Origin, I'll say it like this. They're not famous for telling us what's going on behind the scenes. Put it like that. These holds before launches of their New Shepard spacecraft are fairly routine. It's usually them double-checking some technical thing or a sensor reading. And most times they pick up the count. But right now we're 12 minutes into this hold, and there's no sign yet when they might be able to launch.
So what are you watching for in today's launch?
The thing about rocket flights is we take them for granted. It seems routine these days, but they're not. These are dangerous things to go do. The risks are higher than just about anything else you can think of that involves flying. And so you want to make sure that the company logs a good flight, that the vehicle performs as expected. Obviously, a serious problem could be a major setback to the commercial tourism industry. And so obviously everyone hopes that doesn't happen, but you have to pay attention to it because it's not routine. And so I watch all of these just for that reason, just to make sure the vehicles perform as designed.
Speaking of design, Bill, one of the things that we were all just debating here in the studio is why the design of Blue Origin's rocket is so different than what we historically would assume with the rocket, that bulbous sort of shape at the top. I grew up watching the Apollo missions. It looks very, very different from the type of rockets that we used to see as children. Why is that?
Well, there are very simple reasons for that, Vlad. It's a matter of where they're going. all the rockets we grew up with and that are still flying today, like the SpaceX Falcon 9 or even Blue Origin's New Glenn, they're going to orbit. And so the spacecraft has to be designed differently because it has to withstand the rigors of re-entry, the extreme temperatures, the G-forces, all of that. In this case of the New Shepard, they're not going to orbit. These are suborbital flights. They go straight up to an altitude of about around 65 miles or so, and then they come straight down again. So the capsule doesn't need a beefy heat shield. It doesn't need one of those giant boosters like we see with rockets that are going all the way to orbit. So it's basically the goals of these missions is much more limited than what you see on an orbital flight, and so the rocket reflects that.
Very cool. Let me ask you what you're hearing about how NASA could be potentially impacted by all of the doging that is happening. Doge, of course, being that Elon Musk organization that is supposedly ferreting out waste and abuse, but they are, without having a lot of knowledge or understanding about what some organizations do, trying to fire people, essentially. What are you hearing about what impact it could have on NASA and its ability to do their jobs?
I was hoping you could tell me. It really is. It really has everybody at NASA and its contractors on edge right now because they don't know what's going to happen. The interns that were laid off at a lot of other agencies, NASA got a stay of execution on that one. Nobody was let go in that first round, but the Musk team did send out that email to everybody at NASA saying, list 5 things you did this week. And if you don't do that, that'll be considered a resignation. NASA management told their employees not to respond to that yet. And now it looks like they're going to be given more time, but no decisions yet. So it's really very, very uncertain how this is all going to play out. I have no idea to answer your question.
Yeah, me neither. All right, Bill Harwood, we'll check in with you when we get a Blue Origin launch. It'll be very exciting as always, my friend. Thank you very much.
Sounds good.
All right, let's get a check of the weather now. Let's bring in CBS Philadelphia meteorologist Andrew Kozak with another look at the national forecast. Hey, Andrew.
Yeah, Vlad, we are getting closer and closer, by the way, to meteorological spring, which begins on March 1st. The pattern already changing for a lot of folks across the U.S. with above average temperatures for a lot of people this week, and it's going to last for a couple of days. So that's good to get a little bit of a break from the winter weather. Let's talk a little bit about the cloud cover across the area. And right now, we'll put the clouds on and show you the northern half of the country is certainly still looking at some thick cloud cover from the Pacific Northwest, where we're talking about plenty of rain. Last day of the atmospheric river, though, that's going to be affecting them, to a front across the northeast that is delivering some rain and even some lake effect snow, but we're going to start to see that pull out pretty quickly as well. And then down toward the southeast, where we have had not only heavy rain, but flooding areas like Key West, looking at over 5 to 7 inches of rain. So the good news here is that all of the severe weather, at least most of it, is going to start to subside a little bit as we start to settle into a bit of a calmer pattern. So the Pacific Northwest still dealing with some rain. We've had some flooding. Areas like the Skokomish River, just west of Seattle, looking at flooding continuing, but that should start to subside by tomorrow. Florida finally starting to clear out. Areas like the Keys, look at this, 5 to 7 inches of rain. We had some flooding even in central portions of Florida. So good news here is that Florida has a chance to dry out a little bit. We have 70s, 80s, and approaching even 90 degrees in Phoenix for today. The national forecast shows that a large swath of the middle of the country coming in on some really above average temperatures on the order of 5 to 15 degrees above. Cool in the Pacific Northwest today and the Northeast, temperatures in the 50s and 60s. That should last through the end of the week before a cooler weekend approaches. Vlad?
All right, Andrew. Exciting stuff. Thank you very much. We'll talk with you a little bit later. Appreciate it. Coming up, mourners say a final goodbye to an Israeli hostage as warring tensions rise in the Middle East. We're going to go to the region next. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Turning to the Middle East now, where mourners gathered in Israel for the funeral of former hostage Oded Lifshitz. He and his wife were both kidnapped by Hamas during the October 7th attacks in 2023. Though his wife was later released, Oded tragically died in captivity. Meanwhile, Israeli forces are stepping up their operations in the West Bank. CBS News foreign correspondent Deborah Patta has more.
More than 40,000 Palestinians have been evacuated from their homes in the occupied West Bank towns of Jenin and Tulkarem. It is the biggest displacement of civilians there since the 1967 Arab-Israeli war. Over the weekend, Israel sent tanks into Jenin for the first time in more than 2 decades. Defense Minister Israel Katz has ordered the troops to prepare for an extended stay, saying the area is being cleared for the coming year and that residents will not be allowed to return. Called Operation Iron Wall, Israel says it's to stamp out militancy. Palestinians feel its real intention is a permanent Gaza-style displacement of the population. Bulldozers have demolished large areas of the Jenin refugee camp, and the local municipality says military engineers could be seen making preparations for a long-term stay. Israeli hardliners have been pushing for the outright annexation of the West Bank. President Trump has said he would announce his position on the occupied territory within weeks. This as his Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, heads to the region on Wednesday to ensure a second phase of the Gaza ceasefire deal. Back to you.
All right, Deborah, thank you very much. A suspected drug smuggler was caught in a literal hair-raising experience. Take a look at this. Police say they found $10,000 worth of cocaine in that dude's wig. The suspect was arrested at an airport in Colombia when investigators say he passed through a scanner, and the scanner somehow detected the drugs. Colombian police released video of the officer inspecting the man and removing the wig. You can see the packets of blow in the dude's hair, which was later tested and confirmed to be that nose candy that you should not be doing. What? Look at that. How would you even know? I just love this video. And the guy's like, oh, what was I thinking? Oh, stay off the drugs, kids. It's not good. All right, let's get back to Blue Origin. We are minutes away from when that rocket is expected to take off. We're counting down until liftoff. Next, you're streaming CBS News 24/7. Planet Earth, safe and sound. You have to come into work tomorrow, all of you. All of yous. Y'all's got to come into work because a so-called city killer asteroid that scientists have been monitoring no longer poses a serious threat to Earth. The space rock, what? You gotta come into work, bro. It's like you're gonna still be here. Space rock had a 3% chance of striking in 2032, but recent data from NASA now shows that the chance is near zero, and you don't want to miss a thing. Everybody get it? Aerosmith, Armageddon. But while humans may be safe, the moon, not so safe. Scientists say there is a 1.7 chance it could strike there. But luckily, no one lives there except the man in the moon. If you believe in the man in the moon. Speaking of space, we are now officially just moments away from the launch of Blue Origin's 10th space tourism flight, which was put briefly on hold before its scheduled launch at 10:30. Let's bring in CBS News space consultant Bill Harwood. Bill, so how close are we?
Oh, we're inside 1 minute right now. Everything looks like it's going well. Beautiful day in South Texas near Van Horn, where Jeff Bezos has a sprawling ranch and a flight test facility for these New Shepard rockets. So it's looking good. About 45 seconds to launch.
All right, let's see if we can listen in to Mission Control.
It's time to hand it off to Mission Control and launch this rocket.
T-minus 10, go to proceed. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, command engine start. 2, 1, ignition.
What a great takeoff shot. New Shepard is cleared. The tower, note on the bottom left that we have our speed and altitude graphics that will increase. They'll get faster and faster as the atmosphere gets thinner. And we've got B3 right now pushing the New Shepard rocket at 100% power level.
How exciting about 3G our astronauts would be experiencing as they are ascending into space.
us that audio from the families that are watching as close as you can get to this launch and cheering on this flight crew.
All right, Bill, so it looks like so far a successful launch.
So far, so good. The rocket is accelerating under the power of its DE3 engine, burning liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen to produce thrust. It's going to accelerate them to about 2,100 miles an hour, that ballpark, and then the capsule will separate, and it'll continue up to an altitude of about 65 miles. That's the plan. And then it'll arc over the top of that trajectory and come back to Earth under parachute.
So, as you know, Bill, this is the 30th mission in total for Blue Origin and the 10th with the manned crew. How significant of a milestone is that?
Well, every flight's a milestone. You know, as we discussed earlier, all of these flights are risky. There's a lot of powerful, high technology involved. And every time you fly, you learn a little bit more. That improves reliability. And, you know, they've got a pretty good record with this rocket and capsule. So hopefully that'll continue with today's flight.
And for the folks that are in that capsule, what are they experiencing at this moment?
You know, when the rocket is accelerating and they're on top of it, they get up to about 3 times the force of gravity as you experience it on Earth. But as soon as that capsule separates, they're weightless. And so as the capsule continues coasting uphill, they'll enjoy about 2 to 3 minutes of weightlessness. They can unstrap and float around the cabin. The New Shepard has the biggest windows of any spacecraft currently flying. So they get a great view from up there. But at the end of that 2 or 3 minutes, they've got to get back in their seats, strap in, because they'll start picking up G's again as they re-enter the lower atmosphere and ultimately descend under parachutes to touchdown.
And so describe the sensation that you have when you're heading up into space and when you're coming back down. Does it feel like one of those, like an elevator, but albeit on a much more heightened level?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, going up, you're pressed down in your seat by the acceleration forces from the rocket. And then when you're coming down, you're pressed down again because as the rocket falls down into the atmosphere, it starts slowing down rapidly. Just like when you stick your hand out the window of your car, you feel the force acting on it. They'll feel that same force, not wind force, but the force of deceleration on them as they're strapped into their seats. But, you know, none of this is like particularly violent. You know, I mean, this is they all say it's an enjoyable ride. And if you note the video right now, you can see 2 separate optics, which means the capsule has separated, the booster has shut down. They're both still coasting upward, of course, but gravity will take over in the end, and they will be coming down shortly.
And Bill, how far are we away from when just ordinary Americans might be able to afford? I mean, we keep calling these space tourism flights, but really they're for the uber wealthy or celebrities. What's your prediction? Yeah. 10 years, 20 years, 50 years?
I think it's a long time. These rockets are very expensive. You know, pending some breakthrough in propulsion, I think it's going to be a long, long time before the average person can go strap into one of these and go fly. They may be able to, you know, through economies of scale and launching often enough, they maybe could get this down into the realm of, you know, an around-the-world passenger cruise on a ship, that kind of thing. But those aren't cheap either. And so I think we're a long way from seeing something where, like I said, your average person could go buy a ticket to space.
Yeah. All right, Bill Harwood, thanks again for joining us on this Blue Origin launch 30th overall for the New Shepard program. As always, we appreciate it, my friend.
My pleasure.
Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Andrew Kozak with the last look at the national forecast. Hey, Andrew.
Hey, Vlad, that's exciting stuff. Back here on Earth, we are taking a look at temperatures and sky conditions that are actually going to be very nice if you like spring for much of the country. Dealing with some leftover showers and some snow showers in the Pacific Northwest. That'll come to an end. Some light showers along a weak front in the Northeast, but that's also going to be ahead of some very warm temperatures. We have 70s and 80s in the midsection of the country back toward the Southwest. For Florida, we're finally starting to clear out after some heavy rain and enjoy spring-like weather across the I-95 corridor up and down the East Coast today. Vlad?
All right, Andrew Kozak for us. Andrew, thank you, my friend. Speak to you tomorrow. That does it for me, folks. Stay right where you are after the break. Mugo Diwe is live from San Francisco with all the news breaking from coast to coast. This is CBS News 24/7.